Fatty McFat. What is he talking about?
Right from the very first scene, we are introduced to a group of 3 school bullies who are already on the hunt. They aren't wandering the hallways looking for trouble, they are looking for a specific kind of victim. Someone quiet, someone who won't fight back. Someone they can push around without any consequences. And as the movie opens, we quickly realize they've already found their favorite target. His name is Jimmy Mulligan, a heavy-set teenager who walks through the world with his head down and his shoulders caved inward, as if he's been shrinking himself for years just to take up less space. The ringleader of this bully crew is a boy named Miles, and he doesn't waste any time letting everyone know who's in charge. In front of the entire class, Miles zeroes in on Jimmy and launches into the kind of verbal attack that is designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate. The kind that lands in front of witnesses, so the shame echoes long after the words are gone. What's immediately striking about Jimmy is that he doesn't fight back. He doesn't even flinch. He absorbs every insult like a sponge soaking up water, because fighting back would only make things worse. This isn't weakness, this is survival. Jimmy has been living under Miles's thumb long enough to know the rules of this particular game. And rule number 1? Don't draw more attention to yourself than you already have. But Jimmy is not entirely alone in all of this. He has 2 friends, Andy and Bobby, who are every bit as much outsiders as he is. They don't have the social standing to step in and defend Jimmy publicly, but they are always there watching from the sidelines, quietly seething at the injustice unfolding in front of them. They call Miles what he is, a complete and total jerk, but they say it quietly, between themselves, where it can't land anyone in trouble. At home, Jimmy's mother can clearly see that something is wrong with her son. There's a heaviness to him that wasn't always there, a distance behind his eyes. Every evening she asks him how his day went, and every evening he gives her the same rehearsed answer that everything is fine. He's not fine. But admitting that would mean telling the truth. And telling the truth would mean dragging his family into something he's convinced himself he has to handle alone. The isolation starts creeping into every corner of his life. Even when Andy and Bobby invite him to hang out after school, Jimmy turns them down, because Miles lives in the same neighborhood. Because stepping outside means the possibility of an encounter Jimmy isn't ready for. So he stays inside, and the walls of his own home slowly start to feel less like protection and more like a cage. Then comes the moment that changes everything. One morning on the walk to school, Miles and his crew appear out of nowhere, cutting off Jimmy and his friend's path like they own the street, because in their minds they do. Miles has decided that Jimmy now owes him $100, not for any particular reason, just because he can demand it, just because Jimmy has never said no before. The amount is deliberately impossible. Miles knows Jimmy doesn't have that kind of money. That's the whole point. The humiliation isn't really about the cash, it's about the power. Jimmy pleads. He explains. He tries to reason with someone who has no interest in reason. Miles gets louder, more threatening. The situation is about to turn physical when something unexpected happens. Miles suddenly locks eyes on someone standing in the shadows just down the street. And instantly, all of that manufactured confidence drains right out of his face. The person watching is named Vinny. Vinny is the kind of figure who doesn't need to say anything to command a room. His reputation alone does all the talking. Word around the school is that Vinny has connections, skills, and a zero-tolerance policy for watching stronger kids prey on weaker ones. Meanwhile, the cruelty isn't reserved for Jimmy alone. Bobby, whose personality doesn't fit the rigid mold of what these bullies consider acceptable, becomes another favorite target. When Miles mocks Bobby in front of the entire class in a vicious public display, it's Jimmy who has to pick up the pieces afterward. Sitting with his friend, trying to remind him that they are better than the people tearing them down, Jimmy says the words he's been trying to convince himself of for months. They're just jerks. Don't let them win. Later in the cafeteria, Andy and Bobby are quietly scheming on Jimmy's behalf. They've noticed something: a girl named Adrian keeps glancing over at Jimmy during lunch. Not in the way people look at someone they're mocking. In the way someone looks at a person they're genuinely curious about. The 2 friends see a spark, and they decide to fan it. Before they can execute their matchmaking plan, Miles slides into the seat beside Jimmy and picks up right where he left off, demanding his $100. A nearby student finally speaks up and tells Miles to knock it off. Miles, who has never met a challenge he didn't want to crush, fires back with a nasty insult. But then something remarkable happens. A much bigger student, someone who clearly isn't afraid of Miles at all, stands up. The look on this larger boy's face is enough. Miles, who has spent so much energy making others feel small, suddenly discovers what it feels like to be the smallest person in the room. He bolts. And yet the moment school lets out that same day, Miles is back, waiting, demanding, as if the humiliation in the cafeteria never happened. But something has shifted in Jimmy. For the first time, standing there on the sidewalk with Miles in his face, Jimmy looks him dead in the eye and says, "I'm not giving you anything." Miles doesn't know what to do with that, so he does what bullies always do. When someone refuses to play the victim, he swings. Jimmy takes the first hit, then another. But before it goes much further, a voice booms from down the street, stopping the attack cold. An older man has stepped outside to intervene. He doesn't back down when Miles snarls at him, and the sheer weight of his presence sends the bully running. The man introduces himself to Jimmy as Mr. Action, and he brings the bruised teenager inside to tend to his injuries. Inside Mr. Action's home, Jimmy's eyes land on a framed photograph hanging on the wall. A fighter, a champion, and as Mr. Action tells him the story behind that photo, Jimmy starts to understand exactly who this man is, a former national boxing champion. In that moment, something ignites in Jimmy's chest. A question forms before he even fully realizes he's asking it. "Could you teach me?" Mr. Action hesitates. His body isn't what it used to be. Coaching would put a strain on him he's not sure he can handle anymore, but he doesn't close the door entirely. He tells Jimmy he knows someone who can help someone who might be even better for what Jimmy needs. He drives Jimmy home, but now he has to explain the black eye and split lip to Jimmy's parents, who open the door with expressions that shift from confusion to alarm in half a second. Mr. Action lays out exactly what happened, and then makes his pitch. Self-defense classes, boxing training, a structured program to make sure this never happens again. Jimmy's parents hesitate. Their instinct, like most parents, is to keep their child away from conflict, not throw him deeper into it. They thank the old man and tell him they'll think about it. But the bullying doesn't wait for parents to think. Not long after, Mr. Action opens his door to find Jimmy standing on his porch, fresh bruises on both sides of his face, and standing directly behind him are his parents. They've stopped hesitating. They're here because they're out of other options, and they're asking what this old champion has in mind. The answer is a man named Manny. Manny runs a local gym and has been in the training business long enough that Mr. Action calls him the best in the business, without a hint of exaggeration. Jimmy's parents are present when Manny agrees to take on the boy as a student, and Manny makes one thing crystal clear from the start. If you step through that door, you finish what you start. No slacking. No quitting. Jimmy agrees, and his training begins. The early sessions are brutal. Every muscle in Jimmy's body screams at him. The bags are heavy, the drills are relentless, and Manny gives no ground. But Mr. Action is always there, not training but watching, encouraging, making sure his young friend doesn't give up when the work gets hard. On one of their evening rides home, Jimmy brings up the one problem that hasn't gone away. Miles is still demanding his money. Mr. Action smiles and proposes a plan that walks a razor-thin line between clever and reckless. He tells Jimmy to go back to Miles and offer him double $200, but only if Miles agrees to give him a full month to come up with it. 4 weeks. That's all they need. The logic is airtight. By the time that month is up, Jimmy won't need to pay anyone anything because he'll be ready to defend himself. Miles's greed will be his undoing. And sure enough, the next morning, Jimmy walks up to Miles with a calm he's never carried before and sells the story perfectly. He's got a job lined up. He needs a few weeks, but he'll make it worth the wait. Miles, blinded by the thought of twice the money, agrees. For the first time in longer than Jimmy can remember, the weight of the constant threat is lifted from his shoulders. He can breathe, and that breathing room, ironically, creates a new problem. The very next session at the gym, Jimmy shows up sluggish. His punches lack conviction. His movements are half-hearted. Manny sees through it immediately. The boy's body is fine. It's his mind that's checked out. The danger has temporarily disappeared, and so has the urgency. Manny pulls Mr. Action aside and voices his concern plainly. The kid's heart isn't in it right now. That evening, driving home in near silence, Mr. Action gently pushes Jimmy to say what's really going on, and the dam finally breaks. Jimmy confesses what he's been carrying beneath all that physical exhaustion, the fear that none of this will matter, that even after all the training, he might still end up flat on his back in front of everyone. He might still lose. Mr. Action doesn't rush to reassure him with false promises. He tells Jimmy that the discipline he's building right now, it's about who he becomes on the other side of it. That strength, real, internal strength, doesn't disappear, even if one battle doesn't go your way. Jimmy hears the words, but they don't fully land until later that night at home. His father notices the doubt still clinging to his son and sits down beside him. He just speaks quietly about the future, about the day Jimmy might have children of his own, about what it would mean to be able to look them in the eye and teach them how to stand up for themselves, because he had done it first. That single image of a future version of himself, passing on the courage he's building right now, completely reignites something in Jimmy. He goes back to the gym the next day like a different person. The shift is undeniable. Whatever hesitation existed before has burned away entirely, and the fuel behind it isn't just his own pain, it's Bobby's. Because while Jimmy was wrestling with his own doubts, Miles and his crew chose Bobby as their next target. Not just verbal this time. They put hands on him, they left marks. And when Jimmy finds out, something cold and focused settles over him. He doesn't wait for a ride. He grabs his bike and pedals the entire distance to the gym himself. Manny watches his student walk through the door with fresh fire in his eyes and knows immediately that something has changed. The sessions that follow are different, sharper, more controlled. Manny begins weaving martial arts techniques into the training, precise, calculated movements designed to neutralize aggression rather than just absorb it. Mr. Action works on Jimmy's mental composure alongside the physical drills, sharpening his ability to stay calm when everything around him is chaos. During one session, a punch Jimmy throws catches Manny completely off guard, hard enough to put the trainer flat on the mat. For a moment, there's a stunned silence, and then Manny smiles. Because that wasn't luck, that was skill. That was a student who has found his edge. Outside the gym, Jimmy's life starts to open up. He tells Andy about the training, the secret sessions, the strategy, the plan to finally end Miles' reign of terror for good. Andy's reaction is exactly what you'd expect. Pure, wide-eyed disbelief followed by absolute excitement. And then Adrian appears. The girl who had been quietly watching from across the cafeteria for weeks finally approaches. And the conversation that follows is easy in a way neither of them expected. They go to a party together. They talk for hours, not the shallow kind of talking that fills silence, but the real kind, where you say things you've never said out loud to anyone. By the end of the night, it's clear to both of them, something has started here. But happiness in this story never gets to exist without a threat lurking nearby. Eddie, one of Miles's closest allies, spots them together and can't resist inserting himself, mocking Jimmy and Adrian both, sneering at the idea that someone like Jimmy could be with someone like her. The old Jimmy would have swallowed it. This Jimmy looks Eddie in the eye, says what needs to be said in a voice that doesn't shake, and watches Eddie quietly retreat. The 4 weeks of training are up. The morning of the deadline arrives, and instead of dread, Jimmy wakes up with something that feels like clarity. He knows what today is. He knows what's waiting for him at school, and he's ready. Miles is already positioned at the school gates when Jimmy arrives, exactly as expected. Arms crossed, impatient, fully expecting to collect his $200. He makes one thing very clear. If Jimmy doesn't pay up, Andy and Bobby will be the ones suffering for it. But then Jimmy makes a quick stop in the school bathroom before anything can escalate. And he's not alone in there. Vinny is already inside, leaning against the wall like he's been expecting Jimmy. Word of the gym sessions has reached him. Nothing stays secret for long in a place like this. Vinny studies Jimmy for a moment, reading whatever it is he sees in the boy's face. And then he says something simple, something that Jimmy needed to hear from someone like Vinny specifically. It's time. Go out there and finish it. What neither of them knows is that Eddie has been hiding in one of the stalls the entire time, listening to every word. The moment the bathroom empties, Eddie's phone is already out. He texts Miles with the update and reveals the one piece of information that shatters Miles's entire plan. Jimmy hasn't just been hiding for the past month, he's been training. As a boxer, Miles doesn't want a fair fight. He never did. Fair fights are for people who rely on skill and courage. Miles relies on numbers and fear. So he makes a call to a local enforcer known as Glass Joe Billy. Bring in the muscle. Let someone else do the actual dirty work. By the time the final bell rings, word has spread through every hallway in the building. Everyone knows what's about to happen outside. And when Jimmy walks through those doors toward Miles and his crew, the look on his face stops people cold. This isn't the same kid they've watched get pushed around for months. Something fundamental has changed, and everyone watching can feel it. Miles feels it too, which is why he's desperately counting on Glass Joe Billy to arrive and handle this. He never shows up, because Vinny got there first. His crew intercepted Billy before he could ever reach the school. And now Miles is standing exactly where he never wanted to stand, alone, without backup, facing someone who is no longer afraid of him. The fight begins with Miles landing an early shot, a solid hit that rattles Jimmy and sets the crowd on edge. But Jimmy doesn't go down. He steadies himself, clears his head, and starts doing exactly what Manny drilled into him over 4 grueling weeks: timing, reading the rhythm of his opponent, slipping punches rather than eating them, waiting for openings. When Miles swings wide, Jimmy moves. When Miles overcommits, Jimmy counters. Heavy shots land, and Miles absorbs them less and less well with each exchange. When the rest of Miles's crew tries to swarm in and turn the odds, Andy and Bobby launch themselves forward, throwing themselves into the fray and fighting off the pack with everything they have, buying Jimmy the space he needs. Now it's just the two of them. Jimmy uses the head movement he drilled into muscle memory to slip Miles's last desperate swings and fires back with clean, sharp counters. A stinging final strike sends Miles stumbling backward before he drops to the grass in front of the entire school. He tries to scramble up for one last desperate move, but Jimmy puts an end to it instantly, a perfectly placed knee that takes the remaining fight right out of him. Miles stays down. The crowd erupts. Adrian rushes in. Jimmy stands over the moment not with rage, but with something much more quiet, the kind of peace that comes from having done something you thought might break you. Mr. Action watches from the edge of the field, and what strikes him most isn't the technique, isn't the execution, it's the look on Jimmy's face after the win. There's no cruelty in it, no gloating. The kindness that was always at the core of this kid is still right there, completely intact. He built strength without losing himself. That's harder than any punch he threw today. By the time school dismisses, the video of the fight has already traveled to every phone in the building. The story of what happened outside reframes Jimmy overnight in the eyes of the entire student body. But more importantly, it reframes him in his own eyes. At home, something shifts in his parents too. The constant low hum of anxiety they've been carrying for their son, the fear that quietly lived in every conversation, every glance at the clock, every unanswered text begins to dissolve. Their boy is okay, more than okay. When Monday morning arrives, Miles and his crew are gone from the picture entirely. And Jimmy, flanked by Adrian, Andy, and Bobby, walks through the front doors of the school without looking over his shoulder, without bracing for impact, without making himself small. For the first time in longer than he can remember, he just walks. And that, right there, is the whole point of everything that came before it. If this breakdown hit different and kept you glued from start to finish, do yourself a favor and subscribe right now, because if you leave without subscribing, you are literally choosing to miss out on more breakdowns just like this one. And we both know you'll regret it the next time a great movie drops and you can't find anyone explaining it the way we do. Hit that subscribe button, it costs you nothing. And drop a comment below. Did Jimmy make the right call by standing his ground, or should he have found another way out? Let us know.